In this space of securing major gifts for your organization through what I call relationship fundraising, many times we may step into this process with our own points of view and our own perspective on how we should communicate and build a relationship with this donor. Well, today I'm going to be talking about understanding and knowing your donor's fundraising love language. Yes, that is our topic. Let's huddle up. Hey, welcome to another episode of Huddle Up with Mark, the Fund Coach. I'm Mark Duncan. Today, I want to talk about this whole idea of making sure that we are leaning into these relationships with major donor prospects in a way that is going to be beneficial to the organization and, quite frankly, beneficial to them as individuals. So, when I talk about a fundraising love language, and I'm going to pause here because I do this sort of came out of a coaching session recently. And I'd love to credit um, Cindy Lopez and Todd Thaxton of Leap organization out on the West Coast that I work with, because the conversation that we had most recently inspired this topic. So I want to acknowledge them right at the top. It's really, really important that when we start to build relationships with major gift prospects, that we are taking ourselves as much out of the equation. And what I mean by that is our own perspectives on this and what we think donors want to hear. Now, you've heard me talk about the platinum rule before. I'm going to repeat it again because it is applicable to this topic. And everybody knows the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you, right? Treat others like you want to be treated. The platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. And that is the spirit in which I am bringing this topic to you in this episode, because that is how you should be approaching your donors all the time, especially when it comes to providing information to them that will inform them, and in a way that when you ask them to give, they will be prepared to do so. So, what is the fundraising love language? What are they? There are two, very very simple. Okay, there's the head donor, right? The donor who is driven primarily by what they think. I call these folks the thinkers, and these are people who are thoughtful. And I don't mean thoughtful in a way in the opposite of being, mean or nasty. I mean, they think about what they're going to do, and their decisions are driven by what they think about the organization. So they're going to be more interested in hearing data. They're going to be interested in hearing numbers. So if you are serving a particular population, then you should be talking to head donors in a way that is going to be appealing to them. So you're going to be talking about the numbers of people that are being served compared to when you started to where you are now, especially if there's been a significant improvement. You're going to talk about your financials and how stable your organization is. You're going to talk about your goals and where you want to be in 3, 5, 10 years from now, right? That's That's the language that will resonate with those thinkers. Okay. So you need to be speaking to them from that perspective, even if it's not something that you would be driven by, right? Again, platinum rule. So this is about you getting out of your own way and paying attention. And we'll get to what you need to be paying attention to in a moment. So those are your thinkers. Now let's talk about your heart donors, your feelers. This is the other language that people speak. And this is might be the language that speaks to you as a leader. I would bet, and I don't have data to support this as I sit here, but I would bet that if we were to assess nonprofit leaders, especially those in the human services space, you're probably going to find the vast majority of them leaning toward being feelers, right? Because it may be what motivated them to step into this space, and particularly maybe it motivated you to step into the space that you're in because you wanted to make a difference. And so your feelers are going to be motivated by stories, stories that they hear about how people are being served by your organization, that you're making a difference in those lives. And hearing directly from the people being served is even more beneficial because now they're hearing directly from those individuals about how what you're doing as an organization, as a mission, is changing their lives. So those are the feelers, right? Those are the folks that are going to make decisions that are driven by emotion. Okay, so you need to now figure out what your donors' fundraising love language is and how do you do that? Well, this is where a majority of mistakes happen is on that first visit. We're nervous, we're unsure, we've just met this person, maybe you've known them, but this is your first one-on-one conversation with them. And so you're going to walk into this meeting with some level of anxiety, I'm sure. And so when we get anxious, sometimes we overspeak and feel like we need to fill the dead air, and instead of doing what I'm about to share with you. And so during that first conversation, the exchange is going to be really critical. You want to do more listening than talking. You want to ask questions from both of those languages, and you want to talk about your organization in both of those languages so that you can discern what resonates with them. So you've got to pay attention to body language. You have to pay attention to facial expressions. You have to pay attention to the questions that they're asking, because the questions that they're asking, that's what's going to tell you what their fundraising love language is. If they start asking you questions about your organization and the number of staff that you have and the some data around how you're impacting the lives of the people that you're serving. You know, when you started, what were the numbers of people that were being served compared to now? Those are going to be your thinkers. Your feelers are going to ask questions about the people being served. They're going to want to know what it is that you're doing to impact their lives and how you're doing it. And they may be interested in hearing stories about particular individuals being served, and you should be prepared to share those. But in that initial visit, this is really super critical. You have to take the time to probe and ask those questions that are going to elicit the kinds of questions or those kinds of responses that will tell you what language they speak. So you're going to be asking questions, but you're also going to be providing them with information about the organization. But again, do your best to do as little talking as possible. I'm not saying that you be really short and straight to the point, but the whole tone of the meeting should be about you sharing information about the organization at a high level, right? And speaking both languages so that you can discern what resonates with them and what questions they may have or statements that they may make about things that have happened to them or people that they know. Once you determine this, it makes the ask when that time comes so much easier. And I'm going to add one more thing in here. Oftentimes, when we're out starting to build these relationships, sometimes we're under the gun. We need to raise $100,000 by, right? That may be in the back of your mind. And so you have to watch yourself because what you don't want to do is rush this process. Because if you ask too soon, you probably won't get anything. I'm going to say that again. If you ask too soon, you may not get anything. You've got to take the time to build that relationship and to learn what donor love language or fundraising love language they speak. So if you're jumping into relationship fundraising out of a need to get those big dollars, this does take time. And I recognize what's happening, particularly right now, as it relates to other kinds of funding that organizations are losing or there's a threat of them losing. That there's now this rush to be able to replace that. And I'm going to sit here and tell you that that is not a good strategy. It's not a good strategy. And I talked about that in a previous episode in terms of what you need to be doing to be able to replace the dollars that you may have lost or could be losing. But it's going to take time to do that. You've got to give yourselves about 3 years to replace that funding with individual giving. Not going to get into that again. Go back and listen to that episode if you'd like. But part of this process and why it takes you that amount of time to be able to replace that funding with individual giving, especially from major gifts, is because you have to build that relationship. And part of building that relationship is understanding their fundraising love language. That, once you've got that down, and there will be so many other things that you'll learn about the individuals that you're building relationships with. There'll be personal things that you'll hear from them, things that are maybe happening in their lives that they'll share with you, or you may hear about their children and their successes and all of those things. And these are things you need to pay attention to and sort of tuck them away. And you should be tucking them away in your database, by the way, right? So every time you go out on a visit, you should be writing a call report in your database summarizing what took place so that you don't lose those pieces of information that could be helpful down the road. That's what your database is for, among many other things. But as it relates to major gifts and relationship fundraising, you need to take advantage of that. So, fundraising love language. I'm going to challenge you that If you are just getting started in this relationship fundraising space, then I'm going to challenge you on your next visit, or especially if it's maybe it's a second visit that you're having, or if it's a first visit, I want you to pay attention. I want you to give them as much information as is necessary during that first visit. Don't overwhelm them, high level, and speak both languages and see how they react. Check their body language, check their facial expressions, and most importantly, pay attention to the questions that they're asking, because that is going to tell you what their fundraising love language is. I truly hope this has been helpful to you. I'm once again grateful to um, my clients that I mentioned at the top of this for inspiring me to lean more or lean into this topic more, and identifying this as fundraising love language. Hope it's helpful to you. And as always, this fundraising thing, it's not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. Thanks. And we'll see you next time.